Hi everybody, this is Rich Formidoni from Korg USA. Today we're in the studio with Kronos, and we're going to dig under the hood of the SGX-1 premium piano engine. We're looking at program A000, Kronos German Grand. What I'm going to do is touch the picture of the piano, and it zooms right in. Now we're going to explore all of these different setup and component parameters, but the first thing I'd like to show you is all the various piano types. So as you can see here, there are 32 different piano types to choose from. And what these are iterations of the same two piano libraries that are included within Kronos. There is a German grand piano library and a Japanese grand piano library. Each one of those collections is over 4 gigabytes in size, and the cool thing is they both reside on an internal solid-state hard drive, and SGX-1 directly accesses almost all of that sample data without loading it into RAM. These piano types refer to the organization, velocity sensitivity, and relative levels of all the samples within these two libraries. So you can see we've got various German grand pianos and Japanese. And you can see Lyle Mays is right there. He designed a piano with us. Russ Ferrante helped as well, and Jordan Rudis did a Japanese grand piano. So if you select a Japanese one, it turns brown. I'm going to go back to the German grand piano for this example. Now let's look at the setup parameters. At the top we see volume and pan, which are pretty self-explanatory. And just below that we see stereo perspective. Now we can choose from player or audience. If it's set to player, notes in the lower register will be louder in the left side, and notes in the higher register will be louder in the right. As we switch to audience, that perspective is reversed. So now the higher notes are heavier in the left side and vice versa. Just below that, there's an octave and convenient transpose function, so you can get to them quickly. Just below that, we have a lid position parameter. Now I'm going to use the slider next to the display to adjust the position of the lid. And predictably, this will alter the tonality of the piano. In the highest position, the piano sound is very wide open, and in its lowest position, it's much more mellow. Below the lid position, you'll see release time. This parameter allows you to control how long the notes ring out after you take your hand off the key. As you raise this parameter, the notes will last a bit longer even if you play staccato. You can equate this parameter to the age of the felts on the damper of your piano. So as they get older and a bit harder, the strings will vibrate a bit more when the felts are dropped back onto the strings. I'm going to reset this to 0 by pressing the 0 button on the number pad and then pressing enter. The next parameter is velocity bias. This warrants some explanation. The German and Japanese grand piano libraries have 8 stereo samples for each key. Which sample you hear is dependent on how hard you press the key. So if you play very softly, you get the low samples, and if you play very hard, you get the higher samples. As we move the velocity bias control, it will compress one end of the dynamic range and expand the other. As we move the velocity bias control down, it will favor the lower samples, and it will take much more playing force to get to the higher samples. Conversely, if we move it all the way up, we're going to be playing much more of the higher sample content without having to play as hard. So even as we play softly, we're triggering samples that are usually in the much higher velocity range. Now you'll notice that the volume is still very dynamic. So as I play soft, I hear quieter samples, but again, they're the samples in the higher range. I'm going to reset this parameter again by pressing 0 and enter. The next parameter down is called velocity intensity. And this parameter allows you to decide how much your playing strength affects the volume of the samples that you're playing. Now this works independently from velocity switching. It's purely choosing the volume of the samples. So to give you an example, I'm going to pull this value all the way down to -100. during that example, I started playing softly, so we heard the low samples, and then when I started playing at a higher velocity, we started to hear the high samples, but at the same volume. Now conversely, if you go up to positive 100 and play softly, it's extremely quiet. Then when you play hard, you can still get up into that higher volume level. So it's a much wider dynamic range. And again, as you might imagine, 0 is a happy medium. You can almost think of this parameter as compression, but there's a big and very musical difference here. It's compressing the relative volume of the samples, not the overall output. Unlike a compression effect, the notes will actually continue to ring out unaffected by the velocity intensity. If you tried to use a compression effect to get that same result, the release and tail of the notes would sound very unnatural. So this parameter is a great way to get around that and allow you to be heard even if you're playing very softly in a live situation. Now, these 4 component parameters allow you to adjust physical properties of the piano. Each one of them has an on-off checkbox and a value control. Damper resonance is the first one. I'm going to lower this parameter all the way and then play some high notes. Now I'll add in the damper resonance. Now, in addition to hearing the strings, you're hearing the sampled tailpiece of the piano. So much more of the instrument is under your control here. Now, I'm going to reduce that down to 0, which is its normal default level. And let's look at damper noise. On a real acoustic piano, when you press down the damper pedal, you can hear all the felts lifting up off the strings and a slight vibration occurs on every string. So I'm going to exaggerate this effect and crank up the volume. So you can really hear what that effect is like. Normally it's very quiet here. I've really got the volume juiced just so you can hear it, but we normally keep it at a very almost psychoacoustic level. So it's part of the experience, but not necessarily a dominant factor in the playing. Let's take that back down to its normal level. And here is mechanical noise. Mechanical noise is the sound that a key makes when you release it. Now what I'll do here is crank up the volume of the mechanical noise, and I'll play a note, and as it decays, I'll turn up the volume and then release the key. And there you heard the mechanical sound of the key returning into place. We'll zero that out and bring us down to note release. After you release a note on a piano and the damper returns to the string, there's a small amount of time before the string stops vibrating. And during that time, because of the interaction between the damper and the string, you'll hear some additional tones. So I'll turn this all the way down and play some staccato notes. Now the additional ringing is gone completely. Now we'll crank this all the way up and listen to the additional sound. So again, all the way down, all the way up. In addition to all the parameters we've just explored, which make it a pretty complete piano experience in and of itself, you also have common parameters. And these you'll find in every program within Kronos. Here you can control the drum track, vector control, add some modulation with a step sequencer, adjust a 3-band parametric EQ, all your karma settings, and much more. Here's one other bit of useful information. If you touch the Control Surface tab and then switch to Tone Adjust mode, you can see that we've already assigned these knobs and switches to control many of the functions that we just explored. Also, just to make live performing a little bit easier, especially if you have a 61 key or 73 key Kronos, the 2 assignable switches on the left side of the keyboard are usually assigned to octave up and octave down. As you can see, and hopefully hear, SGX-1 is a really capable and very customizable part of Kronos. And it's more than just great piano sounds, it's really completing the entire experience. Now, if you'd like to hear some more sound demonstrations, we have them online at korg.com/Kronos. And as great as SGX-1 is, it's only one of the 9 synth engines. So with that being said, we'll have more videos coming your way soon. So please keep checking back on the Korg USA Videos channel on YouTube, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much for watching.